Hello students, today we are going to practice some watercolor techniques. So you can use a piece of scrap watercolor paper, it does not have to be too big. You will need some plastic wrap, just regular saran or plastic wrap, a little bit of masking tape, which I've used to cut out some triangles. You can have any cotton balls or Q-tips around if you'd like. A white Prisma or a white Crayola works great. And of course your set of watercolors and just some regular table salt. We'll do the salt technique that we want to use. So just pick different areas of your paper to experiment with these. You can divide it off into sections and label them, or you can create an abstract design. It's up to you. So I'm going to begin with the salt technique, and I'm going to use a wet-on-wet technique to begin with that we'll go over in a few minutes, but I'm going to create a little bit of, a regular puddle of water and select a few pigments to put into that. Now with salt, you want to have an activated puddle of water. You don't want it rolling all over your paper, but you want to have it to where it's not going to dry up on you too quickly. So once you take the salt and start applying it very small amounts, so you notice this area right here already absorbed, so it's not going to have a reaction, but all of these other areas where there's nice little puddles, it's gathering and clustering around the pigment, and it will eventually crystallize and create some nice patterns. So that's something that we don't want to mess with too much, and we want to leave it just like that and let it have the reaction that it needs to, so that later on we can come back to it. Now for saran wrap, you'll also need some activated color on your paper, and sometimes I like to mix darks and lights. If I can, put black, magenta, and yellow. So make out a shape across your paper that's not larger than the piece of saran wrap that you've chosen. So I'm going to very quickly apply just a few colors. And let's see what happens. So once you place this on there, you want to just make it stick, and you don't want to move it around too much. So kind of what you get in the beginning is where you want to leave it. You don't want to keep massaging this around, because once the pigments settle in, you're just going to get a blob, and it's not going to have these really cool crystallized or shard-like patterns or shattered patterns that you create. So just be quick about it. Once you start scooting it around, it can create a problem. So it's a real quick thing. So next, I will apply some watercolors around my masking tape. So make sure your masking tape is nice and secure when you put it on. You can peel it off when it's dry. All of these techniques require just kind of leaving it alone until it's dry. So I know it's tempting, but do not mess with your saran wrap, and do not mess with your masking tape until you know it's dry. Blow drying in these cases is not really going to give you the reaction you want. You just want it to naturally dry and do what it needs to. So I'm going to use my white Prisma for the wax resist. It is a little bit challenging to see where you've applied it, but just pay close attention. I'm putting a dotted line of circles, just going straight through these other designs. Okay, so sometimes a white Crayola works really well. So I'm going to apply my watercolor on top. Now if it's real thick with pigment, it might take it a second for that wax to start poking through. You can kind of mess with it a little bit. It's under there. Black is very dominant. I know I had another one over here, so I thought, oh, there it is. Just gonna massage the pigment into the paper. Looks like this circle turned into an oval. So you just want to kind of move it around, let it settle into the paper so that the Prisma or Crayola can come through. Now let's do a wet on wet technique. So you want to charge up a nice little puddle of water. It can be in a specific shape that you've chosen or an abstract shape. And this, you just want to place the pigment in the puddle and let it be very organic and move around on its own. And just see what happens when you let it do what it wants to. You can guide it a little bit. You can put wax resist down before that. I know it might be tempting to add a little bit of salt into that, and that's okay too. I'm looking for the areas that have the most moisture to apply the salt, just to absorb a little bit of the water with pigment that's floating around. A little bit more to these wet areas. Okay, so we've gone over masking tape, wax resist, wet on wet, and we added a little bit of salt technique, and plastic wrap. If you have any cotton balls, you can sometimes come through, and this is great for when you're doing clouds, but you can remove shapes. This is just a Q-tip you can do this with a paper towel, but it's a little bit more controlled if you have a Q-tip or something that has a shape to it. Right, so do not forget to put your name on this if it's something that you care about and you don't want it to get lost amongst everyone else's. Remember, do not touch it, just let it dry on its own and do its own thing, and when you come back to it later, it will be ready.